if you're watching, it'll be like 25-second delay. All right. I think we are live. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Lunchtime Conversation. I'm going to give you an opportunity to share, encourage you to share, and an opportunity to share this before we dive in. I am so excited that I have April Dinwoody with me today, and she's an amazing person and has an amazing body of work that she's done. And we're going to get into some real candid conversation as well as really healthy conversation about transracial adoption. So before we really get started, I'm going to ask, take a moment and share this feed. I'm going to take a moment. I'm going to share it. But those of you that are joining us right now, go ahead and share this feed. And April, if you don't mind, you can share it on your post as well. And we like to welcome you. And so again, welcome. Let's go. This is exciting. Boom. All right. I've shared mine. Cool.
I'm going to do the same.
Thank you so much. Again, welcome everyone. I'm Donald Johnson. I have the humbling honor to serve as the lead pastor for Life Church Auburn Hills. And Life Church Auburn Hills, we're this multicultural community that is being empowered and transformed by God's grace, truth, and love. And we love having these opportunities to really have a conversation, to dialogue, to converse. This is an opportunity because, as we know, social media, I think, has made us experts at commenting, but not really conversing. And so we're shouting at each other, shouting over each other, and no one's listening. So what this opportunity that we have is to facilitate, again, conversation. And today, again, I have April Dinwoody with us, and I'm excited because we met some years ago, and when I got a chance to know who she was and the work that she was involved in, I immediately said, April, we got to have some type of session where, there's people that I love, people that I know that have adopted children, transracially, what is known as transracial adoption. And oh man, the information that you shared is so empowering. And so the whole objective for this conversation today is to facilitate candid and healthy conversation again about transracial adoption from April's personal and professional perspective. And what we want to do is provide you, the audience, with information and tools to support your children and families in the formation of their cultural identities and much more. So I am going to read this bio, and we're gonna dive in. Our friend April. April is a transracially adopted person, a nationally recognized thought leader on non-traditional and multiracial families. She is a former chief executive of the Donaldson Adoption Institute, the founder of Adopment, which is a mentoring program that matches foster youth with adopted adults, and she hosts Born in June, Raised in April, What Adoption Can Teach the World, which is a podcast about adoption, identity, and family. She is an inclusion and diversity expert, and April works with families, corporations, nonprofit organizations, schools, and other government agencies to support healthy identity development of all children and young people. So I welcome you, April. Welcome to Lunchtime Conversations with Life Church Auburn Hills. Thank you so much for being here.
It's my pleasure. It's an honor, actually. So glad to do this. Finally, we've been thinking about this for a long time.
Yes. So April, I read your professional bio. Can you share with us who you are personally? Just give us a little background on where you live, some interesting facts about yourself, and let's start there.
Sure. Yeah, happy to. Yeah, born in Boston, uh, adopted into Rhode Island, born to a white mom that was single, unmarried, had three children that were born to her already, and that she was caring for. And my parents wanted to have another child enter their family. They had three children already. They wanted two boys and two girls. And they decided that race wasn't really an issue for them. They were white and are still white, and as their children are as well. And didn't really give too much of a thought to having differences of race in our family. And I joined the family at about 6 months, 7 months old, and then was adopted into the family by the age of 2, I think. So I spent the better part of my young life to 17 in Rhode Island, a very white community, and then moved on to New York and college and New York City for work. And that's where I've been pretty much ever since. I've been spending a lot more time here in Rhode Island of late, which is very interesting and very different from Harlem to now. Have a long career in marketing communications, but having this experience of transracial adoption, it wasn't if, it was when I'd be doing more work solely dedicated to that. My mentoring program, the work I do with schools, so all the things. But I'm also an athlete. I consider myself an athlete. I do a lot of workouts and my own little concoctions of mixes of yoga and all the things. So definitely that part of my life is very important, and spirituality as well.
Cool, 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 cool. Again, this is our lunchtime conversation. Thank you for sharing, April. A lunchtime conversation with April Dinwoody, and this is regarding transracial adoption. Very important topic dear to my heart. Thank you so much for sharing that. In fact, when you mentioned being an athlete, that you are, I watched one of your videos. You were doing yoga, and I got inspired. You were doing a forearm stand, and I said, I can do that. And yeah, not knowing that it was like an advanced move, I guess, in yoga. And so I did attempt it. And I had my daughters who were the ones to help me get my legs up. They helped me get my legs up. And for probably zero point 0.5 seconds, I was standing before I tumbled and almost wrecked the entire living room. So it was an interesting experience for me. And so, but thank you, thank you, April, for
Well,
inspiring.
listen, you know what, Don Earl, what's a parallel to that as part of this conversation is a lot of those advanced moves in yoga take practice, right? It takes a long time to find your balance, to build the muscles that you didn't know were there, to hold the move. There are many times where I've fallen out of those moves and learned over years. It correlates to this idea of navigating differences of race, class, and culture, right? We
Good.
can't just go up into a perfect forearm stand before we've done any type of work or practice. It takes 10,000 hours, they say, right, to be an expert in something. And when we're thinking about navigating these things that are at such a high level and a high degree of difficulty, we don't have the hours of practice that have been embedded and dedicated to this thing we're trying to do, we're going to fall and the room might crash down around us. So I think that's the sort of a spirit and a theme of this conversation. It's like, how practiced are we at the toughest parts of our lives today, which very much are about differences of race, class, and culture, family structure. And so this very conversation is part of that practice for folks who may be listening, right? So that's the hope I have for this time.
Well, you can drop the mic. That's a powerful parallel. I did not know I was setting that up for that, but it's a powerful parallel. And as we transition into the conversation, I have like 11 years working at Spalding for Children in Southfield, and I learned so much. I did not know how tied and connected this was to my family. I knew my mother was in foster care, and pretty much all her siblings were in foster care, and at one point different homes. And I didn't really know the backstory of like adoption and foster care until I started working there. during my time, I heard that that Moses was used as a biblical example of foster or adoption, and which is a powerful story. And I was just, and this happened just recently when I looked at the story of Moses, and as it relates to this conversation, Moses was in a cross cultural adoption, if you will, adopted again by Egyptian Pharaoh's daughter, and he being a Hebrew. And there was something that was very important that I saw in them that I never saw before, April, that when that adoption happened, as those that know the story, Moses' mother put him in a basket, after his 3 months, and put him in a basket because there was this edict to kill all the Hebrew men, put him in his basket. Pharaoh's daughter saw Moses, and it was Miriam's sister, or Moses' sister Miriam, who was standing by watching. And when she saw that happen, she went to Pharaoh's daughter and she asked this question. She's like, "Do you want me to get a Hebrew to raise him?" Because Pharaoh's daughter knew that she was not that he was not, but that he was a Hebrew, and so again, his sister Miriam intervened and spoke up and basically connected him with his culture. I've never ever seen that before until I was preparing for this. Mm. And just to show you how important, and I think, that's a real subtle insight, but it's so powerful. Moses knew who he was. He knew he was a Hebrew because of that connection.
That's right. That's
Other than
right.
that, he would have been devoid of any understanding of his identity. And then there's other passages that we don't have to get into because I want to get into talking to you that talks about the faith that Moses took, recognizing who he was, and not to basically enjoy the pleasures of Egypt, the pleasures of sin for a moment, because he was connected to his culture. He knew who he was. So, yeah. and Moses' name, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So it's just so important. Yeah. Yeah.
Moses' name means to draw out. And I think this is the thing. Sometimes people draw out of a bad situation. They draw the children out of a situation, either there's neglect or there's abuse. And so they draw out, but that doesn't mean that you have rescued them from their culture, their identity. So I just think that's a really, really important point. So
yeah, absolutely. It's critically important. And it's one to also guide us in as much as how to sit with some of that for a second and really think about what that means to just fully acknowledge the fact that all adoption is transcultural, because there are no two family cultures that are exactly the same. Right. Now, that doesn't mean there have to be barriers to an expansive, family experience, and that people can't move within that expansive way. But it needs to be said that even without the obvious sort of cultural and racial differences, that is true. And how do we then, from that place, look at all the ways that parents and professionals can be very much in service to that idea, which is ultimately in service to what adoption and foster care really is, which is the best interest of children, not the competing interests of adults, right?
That's good. All right, so let's dive in a little further. You have a podcast called Born in June, Raised in April. Can you tell us about that name and about your podcast?
Sure. So I was adopted into the Dinwiddie family. The Dinwiddie family, my parents wanted a girl. They liked the name April Elizabeth. That's what they decided to name me. There were some other names that will go left unsaid that were on the table that I'm so glad they did not choose. I'm glad I'm April. And the many years into my search for my family of origin, my birth family, I discovered that I was named June Elizabeth at birth by my mother of origin. And the name June held significance in my family of origin. It was my birth mother, Helen's, middle name. She was Helen June. My maternal grandmother's name was June. They called her Junebug. And then my maternal niece, my half-sister, Debbie's daughter, is also named June. So that name had significance in the family that I was born into, which was quite grounding for me as a person, even to find that as a grown-up, that I had a name that was given to me that had significance in the family. Those are some of the bittersweet moments in our life experiences through adoption, because some folks I know were not named, or if they were named, they didn't know the name. And so that's a very grounding thing. But the irony of being born one name and then being adopted into another name. And by the way, I'm not born in either one of those months. I'm not born in June and I'm not born in April. Of course, I'm born in October. So, but I like to do math, or I sort of like to do simple math, I guess I would say, which is the 4th month April plus the 6th month June equals the 10th month October. So if you believe in any type of numerology and things adding up, 4 plus 6 equals a perfect 10. And of course, that is sort of how I look at it. That said, I use the calendar as a grounding tool and a metaphor for all the work I do around cultural competency, taking one month at a time and really deconstructing how you can be in better conversation about adoption and family structure, plus differences of race, class, and culture within that construct that everybody can sort of identify with, which is the calendar, right? Like we all know when things are coming. So and the calendar is quite, as you probably well know, quite a grounding spiritual tool, and has been for from the onset of the calendar, which was gathering around, sort of, religious events were really part of the calendar. So I like to bring back that holding of the calendar and help people sort of navigate through the different days and the months and the weeks of the year.
Cool. All right. Can you?
So the podcast basically follows that narrative. So every month there's a different theme and a different guest. And early on, I just did my narrative, and then now I have guests that come on. So anyway, that's the Born in June, Raised in April podcast. Sorry about that.
No problem. No. I like that. I did not know, and I like that 6 plus 4, 10. That's pretty sweet. Can you share with us your backstory? And when I'm talking about your backstory, is your family of origin and then your family of experience. Because again, we have friends who have adopted transracially, and for the record, because people have heard me talk about race, and for the record, we always say there's one race, that's the human race, and for the sake of the conversation, what is known as transracial adoption. Can you share again your family of origin and then your family of experience, your backstory? Just let us know.
Yeah. Well, a dear friend of mine who was also adopted, Daryl McDaniels, DMC of Run DMC, always says he didn't find out he was adopted until he was 35, by the way. So definitely look up that story, because it's a good one for all of us to recognize and internalize. You can't start a book at chapter 2. Right. You have to start at chapter 1. And I say your life does not begin when you're adopted, but when you're born. And your life is made bigger and different through adoption, but it's not the starting point of your life. It's the continuation of your life. So as I mentioned, Helen June, my mother of origin, was a single mom, had 3 children she was raising in Newport, Rhode Island. And I was never able to actually really converse with her or have a connection to her before she passed away. She was actually a little bit easier than I thought she would be to find, but harder to make a connection with. When you have these disconnections, I think the very difficult part of adoption is the loss, the factor of loss. And so much of what we haven't done in the work in adoption is to acknowledge some of those losses. And so Helen really was not holding this experience in a healthy way, which she was not able to receive me as a grown-up in a healthy way. And in a way that I was sort of hopeful to be received, as the narrative went. You were so loved, Helen loved you so much, your birth mother loved you so much that she made an adoption plan for you. Side note, that gives you a very complicated relationship to love and what love is. If someone loves you, they leave you, right? So that's over here. That's for the Valentine's Day podcast. But so, in coming back into her life as a grown-up, I thought, she loved me. She'll be happy to see that I'm well and had a great family and all the things she wanted for me. I'm here to show her that. And it didn't work out in that way. So I don't know very much about what was happening in her life at the time. No one knew that she was pregnant with me. I think maybe only her mother, my maternal grandmother, Junebug, knew, and Junebug left the planet before Helen did. So there's a very few pieces I can put together in terms of what was really happening at that point. I had siblings that were older that did not know she was pregnant. Her siblings, her brothers who knew her, who were still alive at the time, did not know. Good friends that I met did not know. So I don't know much about her. I've learned through some storytelling and some narrative around who she was, which gives me a lot of joy. I mean, it was a very painful experience not to be able to be reconnected to her, but I do get a lot of joy and understanding around people telling me about her. I don't know much about, therefore, I don't know much about my father of origin. And Helen was white. Helen was white, Irish, English, European. So she shared with me that one thing she did share with me in a letter was that an act of criminal violence was how I was conceived. So that was also a lot to process. And so she would not tell me anything more about my father of origin. So an adoption plan was made for me. I went into temporary foster care while Helen decided what she was going to do. That's when the Dinwiddies got the phone call, there's a girl for you. She may be biracial, which was very interesting because I look very much the same color as I am now as I was then. So I was definitely biracial, not maybe. And so my parents were like, cool, we can love any baby. We want a girl. This is how this is going to make our family complete. So I was fostered for a while, then came into that family as a foster to adopt placement, and then was adopted by that family. They were high school sweethearts. They met in 4-H. They were married for several years before they had their first child. They had 2 children pretty much right away, then another after about 3 years, and then they adopted me. And really embraced me into the family, as their child, and treated me no different than my siblings, my white siblings, which was complicated, right? It was complicated in terms of we were different. My skin was different. My hair was different. I was seen as different outside of the family. Even in the family, there were some relatives that weren't super happy about a brown or black person joining the family. Certain things that happened throughout my life, which were not things that we were prepared for, quite frankly. And then made for some very difficult life experiences in a very small white New England town.
Yeah. Thank you, April. How can you share with us how the difference between your cultural experience and racial experience? How can you share what's the difference between that for those that are listening? You had a cultural experience and also your racial experience.
Sure. So when I think of culture and I explain culture, the way that I internalized culture as a young person, as a child growing up was, we don't know from culture as kids, right? We just know what our family is and we know what our family does. And our family did things that were very white. And they're not bad things, right? We watched Hee-Haw. We listened to John Denver. We had a farm that we raised our own product and things. And that's not just a white thing, right? And I'm sure that there were people of color that were watching those programs as well, but my mom's Italian, my dad's Scottish and English, but we really didn't wave any of those flags, right? We were our own culture almost as the Dinwiddie family, which in a lot of ways is why I'm grounded in this idea that culture can be this big thing, but also can be a very small thing that then allows you to be expansive in your own right. So while we weren't expansive to a degree, there were a couple things that are really important. In my high school years, my brother married a woman from Japan. And so I did see my family embrace a different culture. I saw them really leaning into Japanese culture in a way to learn from this new member of our family, and to sort of, it was something that they were interested in, and it's something that really expanded and enriched all of our lives. So that's a very interesting juxtaposition to, not doing some culturally expansive things in my growing up years. And that, again, it's not, anytime I mention anything that may come across as complicated or even some ways, people will say, well, I can't believe you talk about your family so openly and the things that are hard and didn't work. I think all all people are my family, and all anybody I coach or do work with, and all parents are my parents. So I love them. I respect them. And I also hold them accountable, on some level. And I can name these certain things in such a way because I am their daughter, and there is such a deep bond and love there that it's hard sometimes to say certain things and to point out certain things. But at the same time, it's how I'm designed and programmed. And I never once felt like I couldn't really be who I wanted and needed to be. I never saw a white person in the mirror. I never wanted to be white. I loved my white family, but I knew that there was something about me that was very grounded in being Black and biracial. And it was hard for me to get those things. I had to go after them myself, but I never felt like my family really forced me to, to choose. Now, do they understand the Black experience? Not necessarily. Do they try? Sure. I think some do. Others don't. And that's okay too. Right. So it's very intricate, these experiences of differences of race and culture. Now, race was actually a little bit easier, right, on some level, easier to name, easier to say, oh, I know how it feels when that teacher did that, or I know how it feels when someone called me the N-word. I know how it feels to be the only Black or brown person in most of the settings I was in, which is why I upped up the boogie and went to Harlem as soon as I could, right? Once I understood what Harlem was,
right,
like that was where I needed to be. I needed to be around Black people, like full stop. Like it was very clear that that's where I needed to be.
Cool. What are some things, let's talk about your family of experience. What are some things that they did well? And then I want you to talk about some things that you wish that they actually knew. And I'll leave it at that, and I'll follow up. Go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, I think it goes back to what I was saying before. I mean, my family is really sort of hardcore New England, very much rooted in community, very much rooted in love, very much rooted in like providing this like container of goodness. I mean, that's from food to time together. It's very unique. We all kind of live close to each other, and that doesn't make life uncomplicated. It just means that there's a special kind of bond that we share as this foundation. So I think my parents gave me a great church community, right? They gave me a great community, great church community, one that I'm still a part of today. They, gave us enough leeway in our development. So they told us right and wrong, but it was kind of up to us. So there's a lot of independence, I think, that I gained from my parents' way of parenting. Now, that doesn't mean that sometimes I, probably could have used a little bit more reeling in. I mean, that's just life. But my parents were very, very clear. Right, here's right and wrong. Here's what we expect from you, and you either did it or you didn't. Right. So there's that, and there was just a lot of love. So I think that's kind of the baseline of what I really felt that my parents did really well. And I think for the things that they could have done better, I mean, I think every kid could go and say my parents should have done this, should have done that. I mean, we blame our parents for everything, right? But in the case of transracial adoption, there's especially in the early 70s through the 80s, in terms of just not really being aware, and then also not really having the tools. I mean, there was no website you could go to and look up how to do cornrows. There was no Black hair care section in our local pharmacy.
Right.
I was using Pert and Prel and Breck, whatever was in the shower, and I was washing my hair like every day. And it was like, when I finally got to Harlem and started having, Black women help me with my hair, they were like, you wash your hair every day? Are you crazy? Like, I was like, oh, well, so I learned some of these things late. So I think hair, and I always joke, my mom's like, oh, I wish I could have done better. And that's real. I mean, look, I've also had some really tender and meaningful and sometimes really hard moments with my mom, especially like, no kid, at least I don't ever want my mom to feel bad about how she parented me. I mean,
Right.
it's almost, it hurts me to think that that would hurt her. And
Right.
yet I know some of the things I share help parents today. So it's kind of this like, this delicate balance. And, you know, I don't think there's anybody on the planet I love more than my mom. And
Mm.
and just when I think I can't love her more, she'll say, April, man, I wish I knew that. Like, I wish I could have done that better. And that's for a parent to do at any point in the life cycle of their parenting is
Yes.
pretty darn transformational. And my dad too. My dad will say, well, what could we have done better? I mean, those things are transformational. So I wish that they would have talked more openly about adoption. And I wish that we had a better sort of, sense of skill and practice around some of the things that would have helped me around hair and skin and just understanding, what it might be like to be out in the world and be so visible
Mm.
in this white community. Yeah. So those are the things.
Yeah. So really kind of, again, like you said, awareness and the here, which is important because it's an issue of identity. And so for those of you that are just joining us, we are talking with April Dinwiddie, and in regards to transracial adoption and sharing her personal experience. In a moment, we're going to transition to like application, a way to both engage and respond. Let me ask you this, April. What impact did your experience have on your identity? Can you discuss that piece?
Well, family is in time with family in your early years and throughout your life really impacts your identity greatly. So I think the other thing that my family just embodies is a high degree of strength, right? Strength, physical strength and emotional strength.
Mm.
So my part of my identity is a strong woman.
Yeah.
A strong member of a family, this just being a someone you can count on, right? Even just transactionally, someone you can count on. I think that I draw a lot of that strength in my identity from my family. In a lot of ways, I think because my family didn't make me white
Mm.
and didn't also sort of recognize the blackness and the black culture. I had every opportunity to sort of own my identity, right? Like, and kind of build that however I wanted to. Once I became aware of some of the things that I could do to build my own identity, I went right after them. And quite frankly, my family at a young age could have, when I moved as a young adult to New York, could have been like, oh, we're not coming to Harlem. That's not what we're doing. I mean, my family was like they were on the block from day one. They
Right.
came and they were part of my life in Harlem. My nieces and nephews, my extended family, so they were, supportive of anything that I did really. And so my identity development has been complicated, but it was never taken away from me. Things of my identity were never really sort of taken away in terms of you can't be that or you can't do that. That never really felt like I could. Oh goodness, sorry, I don't know what's happening there, but we'll keep going. Hopefully that isn't too distracting. So at the end of the day, I feel like. So that was a big piece of my identity development, was New England strength and all the things. I then really became part of the Harlem community, and New York, really moving to New York was like, oh wow, I can really be anything, and I
Right.
can have access to culture, I can have access to food, I can have access to Black people that I didn't have access to before, even just visually, just visibly seeing more Black people than white people on a regular basis was like profound. I just didn't see that many Black people in my existence up until 17 years old. So, identity development has a lot of things create your healthy identity. And what I would say is that, there's a long tail on identity development. We have a core of who we are, and then we have all these things that can shift our identity at any point. If we become a parent, if we change jobs, if we, change locations, all these things impact who we are and how we move in the world.
Yeah, thank you, April. I have a friend who is Asian, and he just recently shared with me how his mother grew up in a transracial. She's a transracial adoptee, and it was unfortunate that her adoptive parents pushed her away from her culture. There was no connection at all. And in fact, it was somewhat intentionally mentioned or not encouraged that you should embrace this culture. And, as a result, to this day, he struggles with his own people, identifying with his own people, because the narrative, the context for him was Asians was weird. And so he wanted to separate himself from his Asian identity. And it's unfortunate, but this is something that happens in the transracial adoption. And this was just recent and current for him that he struggles with. And how would you respond to?
That's real. I think one of the things that I'm seeing happen today is a sort of a shift in engagement of young people who have been adopted, especially those that have been adopted transracially through some of the affinity groups that I do in schools. There's a different kind of agency that younger people are having that say, hey, mom, dad, this isn't working for me. I need you to do more. And then there are resources, some people like me and others like me that say, let me help. Right? Let me help you, because the only way to help a child that's entrusted to you with their healthy identity development is if you're doing your work of healthy identity development.
Yes.
And when there are differences of race that are present, you have to do that work. You have to do that work initially separate from your kid. This is work that you have to do. I talk a lot about privileged personal operating systems, folks who are just in the flow of moving through the world white and don't really have a reason to necessarily look at some of the things that they do, opening something before they purchase it, not getting a receipt or not getting a bag when they leave a store with a product in their hands, driving, so many things that as a person of color that we have to be precise about our movements. It's like, I help so many people sort of do a personal assessment, even of the cultural intake and the consumption, what's on your bookshelf, what's in your pantry, what's in the bathroom, what's recently watched on Netflix. If you have a kid of another race and you're recently watched on Netflix or Disney Plus or all the things is predominantly white cultural elements, we've got a serious problem, right? Like you have to internalize and intake things, and your kid needs to see you sort of taking in this thing, not because of them or with them only, but like because you love that. There's a story of a mom who says she's white and she adopted a child, a Black child, and she was raising her in a predominantly white community, and saying she finally found an integrated school for her and that there were Black kids in the school, and she was so excited. And but she was heartbroken that her daughter continued to want to play with the white girls. She's like, April, I don't know what else to do. And I asked her a very simple question. Do you have Black friends? Does your daughter see you loving Black people? Do you have Black people into your home for dinner or for meals? And the mom just kind of looked at me, and I was like, your daughter's going to do what you do. And it doesn't mean you can't have white friends. It just means that your kid sort of needs to believe you authentically that you love other cultures, especially the culture and the race that they identify with, because it won't pass the smell test, and we'll know. And then when you put the work on a kid, kids don't know how to do that stuff. And to send them to a culture camp or to send them to an African dance class, you should go to the African dance class with your kid. At certain points, it does make sense for kids to do things on their own, but parents have to reset their operating systems and really assess things. It's not just about reading, the anti-racist books. I have them all over the place. It's not just doing that work. That's important work, but it's also the cultural elements that are everyday life things that you do. Like really taking a close look at those things will help you shift, I think, right?
Yeah, no, that's so good. And for me, I think that's the beauty of a multicultural, multi-ethnic community of faith, is because you see people that are different. And we have at Life Church Auburn Hills, we have this idea we call 3C friendships, which are committed, because it takes commitment when you're dealing with just humanity itself, because things get difficult and hard. We talk about being cross-cultural. Those are vital elements. And then the other part is being Christ-centered, because we want to keep, for us, Christ at the center of everything that we do. And so we're pushing for that. And we do have families that, because of the intentionality and the community that we have, families that have adopted transracially are part of Life Church Auburn Hills. And it's amazing, because one of the things that I heard you say before, and you just kind of alluded to it, is people ask you all the time, they're like, April, what do we do, to connect them with their culture? And I heard you say, connect them to your friends. And then it's like, that's problem number one, because some people, they don't have friends that look anything like their children. And for, a family that is going to adopt transracially, I think that is an important element. And for me, the best place for that to happen, and this is me, is the context of a community of faith. And for us, Life Church Auburn Hills, I had one incident that happened that was amazing. And I'll share this, and then I'm going to get into your application piece as we wrap up. I had one incident. We were setting up for one of our launch team development. We were developing just before we launched our church, and I was putting up speakers and on the stand, and I saw one of the kids. He was walking by, and I'm like, hey, let me just grab him and help him, or have him to help me turn on the speaker, just involve him in the work. And so I picked him up, and I'm like, hey, there's a button up there. I'm holding him. There's a button up there. You click that button, and it turns the speaker on. And then he stopped. He said, hey, you have hair like me. And it was just such a powerful moment that for this young child, this young boy, had a moment of identity where he literally touched my hair. And I don't let people touch my fro, but he touched my hair. and it was confirmation for him. Like, man, we have the same hair. So I did. I'm like, we do. And I bent down and let him just play in my hair. And it was just a powerful moment that happened because of who we are as a community of faith. Yeah. And I'll share this one other story. I went to another church that I had, and there was this young lady after the service. She came up to me and she asked a question. Off the blue, she looked at me and said, why are you so brown? And I stopped and looked like, I was actually thinking, I'm like, how do I get out of this? Because she was a little black kid. And she asked me, why was I so brown? She said, my dad's pink. And her mom's standing there like, oh, what's about to happen here? I had no clue. I'm thinking, let's joke this away and say, oh, I got a tan. And I couldn't. In the moment, what came to me was profound. It was God, because I couldn't think of it. I said, because I am. That's all I had. I said, because I am. And I did not know how powerful that statement was, because when I said, because I am, she did this. She looked at herself and said, I am too. And there was, again, this connection, this powerful moment. And when I shared that story with my daughter said, oh, I know who you're talking about, because she came up to me and asked, are we sisters? She said, you're beautiful. Are we sisters? And my daughter responded, yes, we're sisters in Christ, but it is so important to make those connections for people to see people that look like them. And so what are some key steps would you recommend? And as we, wrap up
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
Key steps that you would recommend for families to connect, excuse me, and you alluded to it some, but what are some other key steps you would encourage families to do,
Yeah.
like neighborhood and
Yeah.
schooling, various
Well,
things like that, mentors? Yeah.
yeah, well, I think there's some foundational things. First, that you mentioned the story, which was so important to hear. For both stories, the young man touching your hair, and then the young lady with, remarking about your skin. Then it flips to, are we sisters? I think the first thing that parents really have to get really good and practiced at, and that starts before they even adopt it. It gets down into it when you do adopt, and it can be engaged at any point. So don't think, if you haven't done some of this work, that there isn't time to still do it. Get really comfortable talking about the realities of the situation, because what I often find with children is that they don't have the facts, and it may not, because they haven't been told. They may not have understood them the way they were told to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have to be repetitive with children. You have to be age appropriate with children. There are tons of books. There are tons of, ways in which we can narrate some of these things back. But parents have to get really, really practiced and good and comfortable and confident at the complexity around adoption and differences of race, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because children are naturally curious. They are naturally interested in themselves and trying to negotiate where they fit into the world. And with the absence of that, or if it's left unsaid, or if we have this narrative that doesn't have enough facts and grounding to it, kids will have a hard time on that path to who am I, and may also, as a compound complexity, not feel the opening to ask the questions that they are having and coming up. So if we're not creating some expansive and openness around these complications, around these conversations about the complexity of what comes with adoption, then we're not really setting ourselves up for success. And that sometimes means you need a facilitator. You need someone to come in and work with you and pray with you and talk to you about how to do that work. And you need to role play it out sometimes, all the things. So because that foundational grounding, which happens internally in your family, that means with that confidence, you go out into the world, you're seen, you're a very visible family, you'll be ready to rock when someone says, well, where'd you get that? And where are they from? And why are they Black? And what, all this stuff that happens to transracial families that oftentimes we're like deer in headlights and we go, I don't know, or we're not prepared, right? So there's that. That confidence also gives you the strength, and that practice gives you the strength and the confidence you need to go into school systems and say, present yourselves as a parent to a kid of color who, by the way, as statistics will show you, are overrepresented in expulsions from the classroom and from schools, and suspensions as well. So, really working for Black and brown kids, working with a sense of reality and with an owning of your family and multicultural family structure, and to be very protective of your kid, means that you're going to, with confidence, go into that school and you're going to make your family known. You're going to also protect the privacy of your kid. You're not going to tell everybody everything, because that's not for them. Right. But you're going to make sure the school knows a few things. One, that you want the data. You want the data for the school system, and you want to know what kids get removed from the classroom, what race they are, and why. That's all. You can have that information. You also want to be able to look at curricula. You want to look at what is being taught about history. You want to look at what's also being taught about science, because that Punnett square where you talk about genes and what eye color, that goes into what's your eye color, what's your mom or dad's eye color. Well, with multicultural, non-traditional families, you may not be living with a relative that's genetically connected to you.
Right.
So you, as a parent, so these are the things, but if you're not practiced in being confident about your amazing family that you've created, one, your kid's going to smell that, right, and take advantage of it. Let's just be clear. Yep. Two, other community experiences, be it the doctor, be it at a school, be it with an extended family member or friend, you will not have your words. You will be operating from a place of fear or concern or anger or emotion, and you will not be able to emotionally, physically, or psychologically protect your kid. right? So those are all the things. I mean, those are some basic things, but it's all about practice and persistence and love, and that's love. Just saying, oh, we love you transactionally, and making sure you got 3 meals a day on that, that's great. And that's important. But love means I'm going to stretch myself. Love means I am going to practice.
Yeah.
Love means I'm going to read that book I really don't want to read because it's too hard. But those are all the things that I find ground families today in the reality of transracial adoption, and make them they're not only protecting their kid, right, which is first and foremost. It's about living an expansive life.
That's powerful. When you talk about love, because some people say, well, race doesn't matter and this, that, and the other. I heard several of my friends, that's what they thought initially, that it didn't matter. But love means sacrifice. it means commitment, like you were saying. And when we think, of course, of Jesus, I was going to say you're preaching, but I but you were preaching. But love means that. Jesus himself, came where we were and dwelt among us. He knew who we were and connected with us. And so when we say we love someone, especially when it relates to transracial adoption, when you love that child, you have to go where they are and continue and to learn and immerse yourself. I think on one of your podcasts, you talked about, a child walking in the house and seeing, Black and brown art in the home, just how reaffirming that is for a person, a child of color. So, there's so many various things we cannot, answer it all right here. But what we want to do is collect anybody that would be interested in like a coaching session or anything like that. We want to find out how many people are interested in this. And then what we're going to do, I'm going to work with April, and we'll try to facilitate some type of a session to continue this conversation, to empower you and also to equip you for the health and well-being of your family. As you said, it's such a beautiful thing. It's such an act of love when you extend your family in this way. One other question, and then we'll wrap up. When it relates to families engaging and navigating during racial tension, as we know right now, there's so much that is going on. And again, we're constantly hearing things that I think just continue to separate and divide us. How would you recommend a family, a transracial family, navigate and engage as it relates to like these racial tensions and things of that nature?
Well, again, I go back to parents, right? First, it starts with parents, because there has to be a safe and a place of engagement and accountability that parents can go and be, whether it could be with yourself, it could be with trusted friends, family members, where you can sit and process some of what's happening, because so many parents that have adopted transracially, especially white parents who adopted Black and brown kids, a lot of them are sitting with a lot of fear, a lot of sadness, and that's okay. But we've got to translate some of that into action, right? So you really do have to be in a really purposeful flow around understanding. Like, if you haven't been doing your work on differences of race, class, and culture, racial identity, your racial identity, now there's no room for you not to be doing that. It really will be unsafe for your kids psychologically, emotionally, and maybe even physically if you're not firmly and, authentically rooted in doing that work of understanding why this time is and what has led up to this, and how you feel about that, and what you're willing to do about standing up for racial justice. There's a lot of intricate layers around differences of race, class, and culture that make transracial adoption a thing to begin with. right? An
Yeah.
overrepresentation of Black and brown kids in foster care,
Mm-hmm.
kids that are Black and brown being removed from Black and brown families, that if it was a white family, those kids would not be removed from that family. There are so many intricate layers to this, which we don't have time to get into now. But if anything, look at some of that, in your very close personal experience. Then I think age appropriately, because remember, you can't help your kid without being really clear on who you are and how you feel about things. So you really have to start there, and then you can pivot to how to help your kid and what that means. And again, it's a team. It's a team effort, right? You may need to bring in all kinds of reinforcements now that you didn't think you needed, but you will soon realize, if you haven't already, that I can't do this on my own. I need to have a squad. I need to have a team of folks that will help encourage me, help enlighten me, help me do all the things. And then your kid might feel scaffolded and seen and heard. But I know for sure we can't ignore what's happening. And that, I think, that willful ignorance will be very dangerous for your kid. And so that will to do must be there. And then you need to figure out how to sharpen your skills. And yeah, we're here to help if that makes sense, if that's useful. And look, what I say, what's important for families that they're in multicultural families, it's actually important for all people in all families today. This is urgent in families that have adopted transracially, but it may be just as urgent on some level for those families who haven't done this work, because this is work for you too, even if you are a biologically connected family. This is work all of us need to be doing.
Wow. That's good. We have like 4 minutes remaining, and April, this is just so amazing. And I really appreciate you spending time with us and sharing your experience and helping us in this realm. A couple of things that I pulled out was, one, not to outsource the work that you need to do, but you still do need partnership. You need community. You need to be able to connect with people that is outside of your culture, your ethnic identity, to help guide you along. And to me, again, it speaks to the value of this community of faith, being multicultural, being multi-ethnic. And so that's just amazing. So real quick, again, Brendan, I saw you post on there the coaching sessions for anybody that would be interested. Again, we don't have a date at this time. We're trying to gauge interest, and then we'll do some back work with April to follow up with you all and let you know what's the next step. So, I guess closing remarks would be, anything that you wanted to share that's on your heart. I want you to speak to actually 3 people. One, adoptees, because there might be some adoptees that are listening. Something that you want to share with parents, and then maybe something for a community that will be supporting parents that have and families rather that are transracially adopted families. So if you could share what's on your heart to adoptees, parents, and then again the community.
Yeah. So to the transracially adopted person or the adopted person out there listening, like, I do this for us and for our culture, for you, being in purposeful conversation in spaces that sometimes are difficult, or there's vulnerability to that. It's important that I am really putting us at the center of these conversations, and it hasn't always been that way. So it's really important for that to be the case. And I hold lots of love and all the things for my extended family of adoption. And for parents, like, man, I love you too, right? Like, I say, like, my work is all centered. The way I do my work is all parents are my parents, right? That is the spirit in which I do this work, because they deserve the love, respect, and the holding of accountability that I would put on my own parents. So all parents are my parents. Everybody's on their journey. And for extended family and community and all the things, like we need everybody to be engaged. We need everybody engaged in this idea of transformation versus transaction. We can't just be transacting through the things. We've got to be transforming. And that means self-reflection. That means self-assessment. That means like being vulnerable. That means making mistakes and figuring it out and resetting. Right now, I think people would agree that our shared humanity depends on it. And it's transracial adoptive families and multicultural families who are sitting at the heart of this. And they have to be first movers. They have to be the ones that are deep in the work, and be in some ways models for the rest of society to be moving with grace and love and dignity and awareness through the complexities of life, because it's all there in our families. And so that's what I would say.
And you have one question that you always, that's part of your broadcast, is like, what can adoption teach the world? And so I want to throw that back at you as we close. So what can transracial adoption, and you kind of alluded to that, what can transracial adoption teach the world and in church or community of faith?
Yeah, well, look, here's what I would say. I don't like the question. It's my question. I don't like it. And I'll tell you why I don't like it. It's because it's about a deep commitment to working through complexity. That's what I think transracial adoption can teach the world. Because on the other side of that can be a beautiful, amazing family experience, but it's not without its deep complexity. And what adoption and transracial adoption can teach the world is that it's oftentimes both and we can live in the both and be happy and well and healthy in all the things. But if we just completely extract only what's good, we will not be doing justice to the reality of our lives. So I think it's living and moving with grace and love and all that through complexity.
That's awesome. When you said that, a tapestry came to mind. One side, looks like a hot mess, as they would say, and the other side of that is there's just beauty, and that is it. Being committed, living through the complexities. Thank you so much, April. Again, for those that are listening, please share this with anyone you think would benefit from this conversation. And also, if you're interested, Brendan Dry, our associate pastor, he posts a link in the feed. If you have any questions, you can post them there and we will follow up with you. I really appreciate you, April. I'm going to pray. And man, this was awesome. And again, we just kind of scratched the surface. Seriously, just to scratch the surface. But this was a wonderful beginning conversation. And so I'm honored and greatly appreciative to you, April, for being here with us and sharing today. So I'm going to pray and then we'll be done. So Father, just thank you so much. I thank you for April. I thank you for her life. Thank you for the grace that you placed in her life, the many challenges and the mountains, the valleys, various things that she's gone through to become the person that she is right now. I want to thank you that she's able to comfort others with the comfort that she has received, that she's able to learn and teach, that she's able to teach others what she has learned and experienced. And Father, we pray, as we know, as humanity we're broken, but you love us so much, Lord, that you came here to rescue us. And we thank you. And we pray that you continue to help us also to be those reconcilers, people that is committed to reconciliation, people, again, that would be committed to being cross-cultural and Christ-centered friends. We ask that you would empower us and continue to empower April and the work that she does. And we love you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen, amen.
All right. Thank you so much, April. This was amazing. Really appreciate it. You have a great day. And everyone else, God bless you. Thank you for joining us. Again, share this feed with your friends, tag someone that you know would benefit from this. And again, if you're interested in going further and deeper into this conversation, there's a link that has been posted, and we would love to hear from you. So go ahead and sign up on that link. Thank you. God bless you. All righty. Bye-bye.